Hey, 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 everyone. Welcome back to The Return of Mandy Mae. This is Chapter 3, The Mercy Tree. Jess walked through the paths made by the explosion, winding around the decimated trees. It appeared like a maze without walls. Jess didn't know why she walked through the winding dirt roads, instead of climbing over the trees to get to her destination quicker. But her instincts pressed against her. She could almost hear them singing in the back of her head as she turned each corner. Somehow Jess knew it was better to walk the maze instead. She'd been turning and turning down paths that all looked identical for a while when doubt started to overcrowd her mind. How could she possibly know where she was going? Was Hale playing with her? The last incident had been a close call. Jess began to feel despondent. Her shoulders dropped and her steps began to sag. Jess stopped abruptly. She shook her head, rustled loose the negative thoughts, then pushed them all to the back of her mind. She couldn't predict the future. She had to keep going. So she did. Another hour went by, maybe. Jess pulled out her phone instinctively to check the time, but was met with an imploded screen filled with a splash of black, the screen light flashing maddeningly. She tisked, and with a sigh shoved it back into her pocket. Jess continued to walk and turn more corners. Then she turned left, and the maze that had looked profoundly the same for her entire journey deviated. Not by much, but enough for Jess to notice. She walked forwards towards it, the orb shining ever brighter. Soon enough Jess reached the end of the beam of light. The light was being swallowed by a white stone scored with red shimmering marks, like the sap that had almost drowned her. The rock was a little shorter than her and came to a slanted point. As Jess approached, she saw on its flat-angled top was a hole. Jess took out the orb, checking its size against the carved hole. She placed it inside. The stone quivered, spitting out gold flecks. It shot deep below ground. Jess looked around frantically as the earth began to quake. Uprooted trees all around her darkened as if being burned by an invisible flame. The trees creaked and twisted upwards off the ground, earth spinning around and drilling through them. Jess took several steps back. She shielded her face as fine but grating dust swam through the air to join with the trees. The branches reached for each other on either side, and the mud pulled them together. Jess held her hand over her face until the earth had stilled. She cautiously lowered her arm and looked around. There before her was a great creaking mouth filled with endless darkness. Soot fell over its arches onto the ground, and the intertwined branches creaked with the strain of its new form. Jess took a step towards it, then hesitated. She took a step back. She began to shake uncontrollably as her eyes were caught by the endless blackness. She gazed into the abyss, hoping to see an end point, but there was none. The longer she stared into it, the further her eyelids peeled back, the louder the screams and crying became. Voices cried out and whispered through the wind into her ears about horrendous missteps, eternal regret, and endless suffering. Jess snatched her face away, squeezing her eyes closed. She couldn't catch her breath. Her lungs rose and fell desperately, and her throat wheezed. "Come on, Jess," she yelled at herself. "Don't back down now." She walked through the angry cold mouth. The voices of terror and pain only got louder, deafening. The tunnel yawned behind her, vanishing into a throbbing hush of crumbling dirt and scorched roots. Before her loomed a gate, the final obstacle she realized. The walls around her began to weep glowing sap, bringing the chamber alive with bubbles and pearls of molten gold. White emerged from the brittle branches, tearing them apart violently. Gusts of ash burst into the air from every direction. large pieces of dry shriveled wood flaking off the cave walls and archway, like a dying moth falling out of an old withered cocoon. Massive, living and organic, the tunnel began to take on a new shape. The arch became reborn, formed from braided spines and sun-bleached bone, tangled with crimson ivy. 100 staring sockets emerged from the thick and overly crusted amalgamation. They lined the arch like ornaments. Glinting pure white skulls, jaws agape with ancient screams that went quiet a century ago. When the cave settled into its new shape, Jess began to journey deeper inside. She reached the gate. It felt rough and was bubbled with rust and peeling gold metal. Its coolness seeped into her stinging palms. Behind it, the world bled into a watercolor fog, smudging horizon from sky, disjointed from its known place of reality. In the center of the living painting, a crooked tree leaned from the fog's heart, half dead, split down the middle like a wound, its branches weeping with torn bits of children's clothing. The mercy tree. The name came into her mind like a quietly uninvited guest, pushing through the back of her throat, slipping down her tongue, and climbing over lips to breach reality. Jess pushed the gate open, crimson red sand pouring out in front of her feet. She took one step, then another. The red dirt stuck to her sweat-drenched legs, forming a gritty second skin. A sound met her, not a growl, not a whisper. Breathing, slow, heavy, familiar. Something stood beneath the tree, towering, hunched, head bowed. For a moment she thought it was a statue, stone cracked by time. But it exhaled again, and its chest swelled. Black feathers glistened down its back like armor. A shape emerged from the mist. Mr. Sal, the school guidance counselor. He stepped from behind the mercy tree, his face calm, unreadable. The crow beast mirrored his movements with a slight delay. "I knew you'd make it," Mr. Sal said softly, brushing dirt from his shirt sleeve. "You're just like her, stubborn, brave, unlucky." Jess didn't answer. She didn't care who she was. Mr. Sal moved with a pronounced flow. His limbs dragged and drifted languidly, his feet barely touching the ground. "You're not Mr. Sal, you're just a puppet." "Yes," Mr. Sal said simply. "When did Sal die?" "It matters not," the voice howled loud and booming. "Is it even possible for me to get my sister back?" "Yes," the creature hissed softly. "Fine." "What next, creature?" Sal's smile slowly bloomed, skin stretched back, rotten and twisted. Tendrils of dark, tangled branches pulled at the inside and outside of his mouth to mimic the expression. All is fear of the unknown. But you want to know the madness of living between. Answer me this, to prove you have seen. Jess took a deep breath and slowly settled down onto the ground. She pulled each legs under herself and crossed them. Her body creaked with the effort, but soon enough she was settled. She knew she had to take her time with the answer. Everything she had experienced so far had been anticlimactic in its own way. Nothing was what it seemed to be, or how it was supposed to play out. "All is fear," she questioned, "fear of the unknown. Why would one fear the unknown? What did it mean to live between madness and fear? Stagnation, perhaps? No, it couldn't be that simple. But then Jess realized. The world, according to Helbrook, in all its complexity, was rather simple. It was a liaison, an aggregate, a magnet for the unknown, a shelter for those marked by the other, a blind spot for that great big eye and a passing lane for the shadow men. The place in between madness and fear. Life, everyday life, all of Helbrook night and day. Jess folded her eyelids closed for a moment. She inhaled deeply and then exhaled slowly. She was sure she had the right answer. Well, her own answer. There were no coincidences in Helbrook, only entropy. Jess expressed from her lungs, and sucked in more bites of air. readying herself. Everything that Jess had experienced and survived up until that moment was connected to the situation before her. Then she got to her feet. Her arm in the sling had long since gone numb, apart from some tingling in her fingertips. The bruises she carried across her entire body throbbed, and her skin seared with the burn of 100 shallow cuts. She met the gaze of Mr. Sal, who by this point was noticeably suspended in the air, a large pulsating and twisted branch buried deep inside his body. Jess parted her lips, hesitating for just a moment. She pursed her lips together, thinking over her answer one last time. Then she cleared her throat and spoke. Death by curiosity, life by the satisfaction of knowing. Silence, more silence, nothingness filling the air but anticipation. No reply, just the creak of a ragged body hanging from a branch, and that thing nestled at the base of the tree. Even more silence, nothingness. Jess could hear the whooshing of the blood pumping around her body with the slight hiss of a sharp noise. Jess readjusted herself. She wondered if her answer wasn't good enough. Suddenly a hollow gurgling laugh reverberated all around the cave, shaking it to its very core. The body of Mr. Sal began to sway again, its mouth becoming slack-jawed like the skulls that ran across the archway above the tree. The body began to balloon and ooze putrefied liquids. Its belly swelled up disproportionately, a faint light flickering inside the transparent stretched skin. The body exploded, bits of mangled old flesh flying around everywhere. Jess dipped low and covered her face. When she stood again, she flung herself over her right side and vomited. The smell was indescribable. Maggots wriggled around in her hair. Jess was sick again. She tore her fingers through her mud and bile-soaked hair and tried to dispel as many bugs as she could. When Jess had regained her composure, she looked over at the body. The last layer of the putrid flesh sloughed off the bones, revealing a bleached white skeleton. As the last of the belly fat fell away, something familiar dropped out of the rib cage. The orb. Jess walked cautiously towards it, but jumped out of her skin when the branch that was puppeteering the body smashed the skeleton into the cave's archway. The bones flew in several directions, and the skull was lodged into the ceiling, now indistinguishable from the others. Jess forced herself to keep moving forwards until she was in front of the orb. She picked it up. The orb shone brightly in her grasp, the images becoming clearer. Jess could hear her sister's voice, smell her strawberry shampoo, see her smiling face. Something inside told Jess to offer it up to the mercy tree. The controlling branch, now free of the skeleton, took the orb from Jess's hand and embedded it into its trunk. The wood fused together. The tree's roots scattered the red sand and drank up the pools of red sap. The amber liquid ran through the scores in its wood like poker-hot veins, pulsating with life. Jess had all but forgotten the creature that curled up at the lower trunk of the tree. The crow beast raised its head. Its face was beakless, a smooth mask of pale flesh with a mouth stitched shut by rows of teeth growing sideways like a zipper. The creature now spoke with the voice of the tree. She lingers. She is not dead. She is close, merely lost. A great mercy for you. It whispered in 1,000 tiny voices. Then give her back to me. Another chuckle, like blood gurgling at the back of a large dry throat. Not free, it said, not free. For you, or me, or thee. What is the price then, tree? No more games. The tree paused. The bird creature's mouth laid hung open and inanimate. But soon it began to move again, the stitches over its mouth tearing and squirting blood. 7 years. It said, from my life? Jess queried. I will die 7 years sooner than expected? Fine. No, the creature's mouth was torn asunder. Blood sprayed everywhere and around it, and its lower jaw hung swinging, attached only at one side. Still the creature spoke with the voice of the tree. Years unlived have no value. Then I don't know what you need. 7 years of life already lived. What does that even mean? I will take 7 well-lived years from your sister. So, she is the one who will die sooner. I don't want that. Useless empty years. Jess pursed her lips into a tight line. Take those stupid well-lived lives or whatever from me. No. The creature roared again, the bird creature's body shedding a massive flux of black feathers as it lunged forward with the weight of the tree's words. She will relive those 7 years. 7 for me, 7 for you, 7 for thee. Jess skate in annoyance, but nodded either way. Good, mimed the creature, blood gushing, its jaw splaying. The trunk of the tree opened to reveal a much larger orb filled with red sap. Inside was Mandy, not the terrorizer of May, but her own sister Mandy Mae, as she was before the transformation. Jess was amazed by the sight of her. Tears started to prick at the corners of her eyes, but she steadied herself. It wasn't quite time to celebrate. She needed to bring her home first. The controlling branch twisted itself into a sharp point and pierced the orb like a bubble. "Hey, wait!" Jess yelled, but she had to cover her eyes as a large flash of light flared up from the tree and orb. When the light died down, Jess blinked over and over, trying to adjust her vision as quickly as possible. When she could finally make out the shapes before her, her eyes fell on the branch, now fused to Mandy's spine. Jess could hear a loud gulping noise, the branch pulsating in time with the sound. As it went on quenching its thirst, Jess noticed that her sister was getting smaller and smaller. Jess ran over to the orb and tried to pop it by banging against it with her good shoulder, but nothing affected the perverse process. The feathered creature lunged up over the roots of the mercy tree and slashed her arm. Blood spattered over her face and its claws. Jess moved back, falling out of its reach. The gulping sound ended abruptly and the orb burst, watery red sap splashing everywhere like amniotic fluid. Jess dived across the tree's trunk to catch Mandy. Jess held Mandy close and began to weep. Her tears spilled out of her eyes like a fountain that had been waiting for release. Jess untied her makeshift sling and used it to wrap her sister's body. Eventually Mandy awoke and looked around curiously. I hope I never have a nightmare like that again. Jess burst into laughter. Me too. Mandy examined herself. I'm younger, but my mind is. She trailed off. 7 well-lived years for you, for me and for thee. Jess said, so I have to grow up all over again. Frustrating. Yeah, just when you were getting the hang of the hellish mid-teen phase. Jess quipped. She squeezed her sister tightly into her body and kissed her head. Let's go home, Mandy Mae, Jess said brightly. Words she thought she would never ever say again. End of chapter, end of story. This was chapter 3 of The Return of Mandy Mae. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next one.